Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming back into the session this afternoon. It's been a great day so far, kicked off by PJ and Louis earlier this morning, and we're in a little bit of the home stretch here. But this particular topic is very, very near and dear to my heart for a variety of reasons. This is probably something I spend most of my time doing. I spend a lot of time interviewing people and finding talent, but really continuing to align sales and marketing within Showpad is something I spend a lot of my personal time and work time obviously doing. The other thing that I think is relevant to bring up at this point as well is I've been at Showpad for about a year now. Obviously, we're in the business on the content and training and coaching side of the world of aligning sales and marketing. That's a fundamental value proposition of what we do. 5 years prior, I've spent at a company called Marketo, which I would argue is the other side of aligning sales and marketing, which is around leads and pipeline and all of those things related to bringing in business overall. And so between the 5 years at Marketo and a year and a half at Showpad, I have seen hundreds and hundreds of customer situations where trying to get Mars sales to talk to Venus marketing on a regular basis has been certainly one heck of a challenge. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time walking through some concepts here, and hopefully you'll find a fair amount of interest in here. But really, we've had a fair amount of product discussion today. Obviously, we've mixed it up a little bit. We're going to talk about the pesky things in the middle, which are the people, for a little while in this session as well. And there's really two very different tribes. Some people say Mars, some people say Venus, but they're two different groups with different value sets, different languages, different ways that they think, different upbringings. And really, you'd think that we'd have solved this by now, but the reality is, day in, day out, year in, year out, this is something that we will continue to need to work as a team, all of us in this room, to continue to improve. It's hard to get these two groups together when the process actually doesn't feel like much of a process. It feels like chaos, and it increasingly feels like chaos. And I don't want to restate a lot of Professor Obang's comments yesterday or a lot of the other research that we've seen, but this idea of it being like there is no more linear funnel, the number of channels we're working on, the amount of interruptions that we have in the day, the number of ways that marketing is going to market, the social selling that sales is doing, it's become quite chaotic. And the automation decisions are amazing, So all of you in the audience sit back and say, okay, which of these 75 pieces of software and technology are going to help me automate the system? And the choices are endless, and they're super, super confusing to try to get to the bottom of what's the best solution for you in the spirit of driving revenue through an aligned sales and marketing organization. So because it's complicated, one of the things that I really try to do as an executive and as a person is I try to take away a bunch of the noise and try to focus on what really matters. And to me, when I think about sales and marketing alignment, I think about two currencies. Two tribes are still going to trade with each other because they have different natural resources, and they're going to have to get along, and they're going to have to become interdependent. And so that generally takes the form of currency. And so I think of those currencies as leads on the one hand, so a lot of my time with Marketo talking about leads, and content on the other hand. Just get me leads marketing and give me the deck or give me the customer testimonials and I'll take it from here, right? I mean, those are generally the two dialogues that you have between the sales team and the marketing team, and frankly, where there's a lot of noise and friction, but also a lot of success and opportunity. So as part of this session, I want to just talk a little bit about a case for change. So, what's going on, and you've heard a little bit of it, so I'm going to restate a little bit of it, but I want to give you a little bit of my point of view on it. Some practical steps. I have 193 unique ideas that I want to share with you in gory detail, but I'm probably going to limit to 3 or 4 or 5 practical details. Third is I just want to talk about the system of engagement topic a little bit, and then I'm going to share with you the real secret. So I'll go through all this build-up and then the real secret to getting sales and marketing aligned and working well together. So, a case for change. Clearly, the market has shifted. And I think PJ made some of these comments yesterday for those that were here. But 89% of consumers now making buying decisions based on experience ahead of price and product. So the Airbnb examples, when's the last time, I generally will say, Uber, come get me. What I don't do is go check with a taxi, what do you cost? what's the Uber cost? Like, that just doesn't happen in my life at this point, right? It's Uber convenience, it comes and gets me, and I go. And I think increasingly as consumers, having that experience and having that expectation of wanting that experience is incredibly important, but it is happily and at some level, sadly, influencing how we're then having to deal with that very same change here in B2B. So the majority of B2B buyers now choose vendors based on their experience. One of the pieces of original research is, and not only are they choosing based on their experience, it's not getting less complicated, that buying process, right? That buying process is getting more complicated. There's data, there's too much data, there's too much content, there's not enough content, there's not the right content, but the reality is that buying cycles are all across the board essentially doubling. So as a marketing team, you have a work to do on that front, and as a sales organization, there is work to do to navigate a much longer and probably more complicated buying cycle than we've seen in even recent years. So what does marketing do to help the solution, right? They figure out a way to build a little bit of content and blast it out to every possible person that will read it through every conceivable channel that exists out there. Peter Ostro on Monday, or yesterday, made the comment, and it was my favorite comment he made, the path to purchase is paved with content, right? So content becomes very much at the center of how marketing creates value and ultimately how sales creates value. And marketing has done a spectacular job of figuring out a way to get that content pushed out through all of these more modern channels. On the flip side, while marketing is really capable of getting it out through those channels, they're great at it, what I would call, there's the tofu, mofu, and bofu, which are even uncomfortable in America to say. But top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel. Essentially, so marketing has really optimized this content game, if you will, in finding anonymous to known, creating leads, MQLs through SQLs. But then what happens is you get down into this place where an opportunity has been created and marketing starts to quickly lose visibility as to, are we providing content? If it's being used, is it not being used? It becomes a black box of analysis and measurement on what sort of value is actually occurring at that point in the funnel or in the buying process. So marketing, as I said, has really focused on the digital channels up until this point and getting people to what, the finish line in some ways in their minds up until this point. And that is, okay, sales accepted the lead. It's now an opportunity. I'm going to move on and go find more to pull into the top of the funnel. And the issue with that is that there's not any of this data that's happening. In some cases, there's not enough content or relevant content getting pushed into the bottom of the funnel for the sales organization. And so in some ways, I think of sales as another marketing channel. If you think of that big purple chart that had 10 different channels, sales is that 11th one, and they've really been left behind in this revolution in digital marketing overall. And sadly, if marketers were celebrating the death of the salesman, or were thinking that somehow sales was going away, buyers still want helpful sales reps and relevant personalized content. So 75% of buyers still want to interact with reps, and 38% find interacting with reps superior to gathering information on their own. So we're stuck with continuing to solve the marketing and sales alignment thing for a good long time to come. So some practical advice, and these are like a little bit more conversational, not that we're going to have a long conversation, but just these are some of the thoughts that I have, and these are just painfully, as I would say in the US, Captain Obvious at some level. But as I go through them, hopefully you'll at least be able to identify with some, and maybe some will seem a little bit less intuitive. So first and foremost, I think that it's important to say that alignment very much starts at the top. And so this is me, our sales leader, Don, and our marketing leader, Teresa, who you've met here a few times. And I think it's super important to ensure that there is amazing mutual respect that exists between the two people, especially the marketing leader and the sales leader inside the organization. Because at any moment in time, if there is some sort of daylight, as I say, in between the marketing leader and the sales leader, the rest of those organizations become highly dysfunctional, trying to interoperate with one another. And so what that means, mutual respect needs to happen. So like, as you're interviewing and finding one of these people, the other should be interviewing and signing off on those. Like, there should be mutual buy-in, mutual accountability. Don't rush it. Don't hire the wrong person into one of those roles because it seems like the right person on paper. If that relationship isn't happening at a mutual respect level, this entire thing gets unwound. And you can probably see either in your current organization or at some point in your career, you've seen that unfold inside of the company somewhere, and it's fundamental. So this is mostly, fortunately, a PJ problem or a me problem, and meaning finding the head of marketing but this plays out at divisional marketing levels, in departmental marketing levels, in segment marketing levels. So it's incredibly important to make sure that everyone recognizes that this alignment starts at the top. And I would say the bonus is if you can find two people that not only have mutual respect and work well together, but they also actually like each other and like spending not just professional time, but social time with one another, because that just it creates that same sense among the teams working together. I told you these would be obvious, so hopefully I'm delivering on obvious. Yes? So I think the second is definition of what is your process, like what is your funnel, and making sure, if you're gonna start with anonymous leads to known leads, or if you're gonna start with known and prospects to leads, to MQLs, to SQLs, to SQAs, to SQOs, to define all of your lingo for the marketing funnel, and then define your sales stages extremely clearly. And to me, it's one thing to define it, which is harder than it seems because people have different points of view on this. But I can tell you, in my experience, I absolutely insist that the marketing leaders in companies we work with have to understand the sales stages as well as the head of sales does. And the head of sales, more importantly, needs to understand exactly how the marketing funnel works. You have to understand the different processes that your counterpart are going through, because otherwise you'll get into, I'm pulling this lead down the funnel, and I'm using a certain set of content. And then unfortunately, what's happened is I didn't realize that you had this qualification criteria in stage 3 of your sales cycle, and they fall out, right? And so if you just live in your world and all you think about are your stages or your steps in your funnel, and you don't understand where it's headed or where it came from as the leader on the other side, I think it ends up being a really problematic relationship that is just you start making decisions based on emotion, and well, all I know is pipeline isn't big enough and it should be more, and I don't understand why not. You just get into these like nonsensical discussions otherwise. So education and taking that very seriously. The other comment that I would make is ensuring that marketing and sales, but marketing primarily, takes a content strategy that runs the entire gamut of the funnel all the way through all of the sales stages to closed and including existing customers as well. So the content strategy cannot stop at, I got an MQL. One of the things Teresa's famous for saying is you can't buy beer with an MQL. And it's like she is accountable to make sure that things move from sales stage 3 to sales stage 5. And I see that with really good marketing leaders that are tuned in to their sales organization. And the last thing that I would highlight is this top of funnel thing is really back to my leads and content topic. Marketing automation, leveraging content, is really the engine putting content into the funnel from a marketing standpoint. Sales enablement, a lot of what we've talked about here this week, is what puts content into the hands of your sellers into the bottom of your funnel. Another Captain Obvious, shared metrics. The meetings you go to where marketing brings their numbers and they're amazing, and sales brings their numbers and they're all missing, and then this happens nonstop. So I and what I've recommended, all of the marketing sales alignment workshops I've run, whether Marketo, and then the interactions I've had with customers here, is establishing that one common set of metrics. And there are not 2 dashboards. There is a revenue dashboard, and the revenue dashboard runs from marketing through closed won, and ultimately through retention and grow. And that has to be one consistent set of metrics and one consistent dashboard that those 2 executives and those 2 teams are all living off of. So I think that's super important, but today, absolutely, people in countless companies still show up with their individual Google Sheet or Excel spreadsheet with their version of the truth. This has been a problem since the beginning of time, and it still exists, and you still have to root it out and make sure that people get on one common dashboard with one common set of bought-in metrics. Then you take those metrics and you have to establish an integrated cadence and some accountability around them. So this can take the place of a weekly forecast. So I generally have seen companies that are running really well integrated marketing and sales organizations They'll run a weekly forecast that spends half the time on what's happening at the top of the funnel and what's happening at the bottom of the funnel, and ensuring that any of the issues or noise or friction that exists between those organizations is out, visible, transparent, and argued on a really regular basis so that you can continue to adjust your strategy and keep people aligned on what the point is here. QBRs, things along those lines, if you just get into it's a quarterly thing, we're a really big business, we don't do weekly anything, that's another place that's a common thing, but you have to create those forums of accountability that include both organizations. The more those two organizations sit, especially at the director and VP and C level, the more they sit in different meetings talking about what their goals are and what their achievements are, I think the more likely you start to see siloed behavior, and the more likely you start seeing friction inside the organization. I think it's incumbent to, marketing's got to create, and not just marketing, but largely marketing needs to create content that moves the needle. So this is, this is another bit where, like, value. Sales says, give me leads, give me content, right, from the marketing organization. So marketing's got to create content, but they also have to understand what content is performing. So we've gone through, I'm sure, a fair number of different product examples where, Showpad, for example, does this, like through analytics and dashboards. But case studies move the needle. Technical specs do, white papers do, slide deck presentations, not so much. And so how is marketing continuing to refine and build the things that matter as opposed to the things that are easy to build, or sadly, in some cases, nothing at all? I only have 143 left. No, maybe just 2 or 3. So I think then you take that to the next level. So I've identified what content is working. Then how does the organization between marketing and sales agree, like, what is a differentiated buying experience that we want to deliver? It surely can be better than just Google Slides or a PowerPoint presentation. And to PJ's point yesterday on the main stage, the number one reasons that sales organizations do not make their numbers is an inability to deliver unique value in the sales process, right? So creating compelling buyer experiences is absolutely and positively a way that these two organizations can collaborate towards success. This is, as I mentioned early on, how I spend a fair amount of my time is constant alignment. Sometimes that is mediating arguments. I mean, I was giving a presentation not too long ago. Here's what I generally see happen. So you have a marketing leader and you have a sales leader, and they don't agree because they come from 2 different places and they have 2 different sets of metrics, and they argue constantly. And then you basically have the executive that manages them that abdicates themselves from the situation and just says, I don't know how to deal with this, and doesn't get involved and solve the problem. And in my opinion, it is something that has to be not micromanaged, because you want executives working together and you want those teams working together effectively, but absolutely positively. In some cases, it's as an executive mediating those 2 teams, like, hey, you're right, you're wrong, or you should rethink this. And in some cases, it's starting an argument between those 2 teams. When you see that one is doing something that's wrong and one that's doing something that's right, you have to sort of incite a little violence among the teams so that they can continue to align and get on the same page and ultimately be super successful together. So my main point here is, it is like, don't take it lightly, don't set a strategy in the plan and then not talk about how's it working, what's our alignment, and how are we going to continue to improve until the next year you do an annual plan, because it runs out of steam in week 3, and it's something that needs to get managed consistently. And the last one, Captain Obvious, is that never forget that compensation drives behavior. So if you set all your marketing team's goals on their top of funnel performance, and you set all your sales team's goals on how many deals they close, there's going to be a lot of anger in the middle of that. And so I think that you absolutely have to figure out how do you get, sometimes it's oversimplified. You take the marketing organization, you said, you're just tied to sales results. Like, figure it out. At some level, you've got to get on the same page. And same thing with sales, like, if there's got to be a way to tie sales to pipeline development results as well. So that generally tends to meet on marketing carrying some compensation around bookings or on revenues closed. Marketing certainly carrying some compensation on pipeline, but also the sales organization carrying some compensation on pipeline, as well as conversion rates or things along those lines, so that they can have a shared accountability further up the funnel than just those deals that happen to close. But this is one of those things that, to me, I've not joined a ton of companies, but every time I join a company, it's like, wow, well, these people are compensated like this, and these people are, and it's like, well, this seems super simple. Like, why don't we just do, and it clarifies and eases so much of the friction that for some reason people just put bad plans in place. So those are the ones that I wanted to have. I wanted to end on, coming back to this topic, just a few more points I wanted to make here. Coming back to this topic is, if you take something away from this, it's like, really just get serious on these two topics when you're trying to figure out marketing and sales and how to get them work effectively: leads and content. And I think, Louis did a nice job yesterday, and I'll just reiterate that, trying to think about this as a system of record or a system of engagement. I think we all generally agree life in our businesses relies on a system of record in the form of a CRM. Marketing automation is obviously then been added in for top of funnel and delivering content and leads through the top of the funnel. And sales enablement now is something that I hope that you take away from this conference and from this discussion as being a cornerstone of how sales and marketing can collaborate and work together on the topic of content. Pulling all of it together, this is something I'm super excited about. Like, to be completely brutally frank, there's not enough data purely in CRM, in my opinion, for there to be meaningful AI. There's not enough purely in marketing automation to have AI, or just in a content system or a training system for a sales enablement platform. But I do think as you pull together a massive data set across all of those different points, that's when you start getting into the ability to have real data sets, to have real pattern matching. So I think that there is some to do on this front today, and I think there is like a huge world ahead of us by pulling these, today, 3 very disparate systems together into a common data set. Obviously, this is my last sort of Showpad commercial. We feel here at Showpad that we've got the most unified sales enablement platform out there across training, coaching, content, and engagement to help drive that black box into becoming a transparent box and ultimately a very productive part of the relationship between marketing and sales. So the real secret we've learned, so I said sometimes I incite violence, like I don't always mediate between the sales and marketing. So I had a few weeks ago the opportunity to create myself as the common enemy against the two of them. So I just chose to really go down a path for a few weeks with that group. And the quote that I just loved the best was, I have spent more time, in one of our regions, like the marketing leader and the sales leader had spent more time together in a week and a half than they had spent in the 7 months previous, because of the level of demands I put on them to make sure that they were fully aligned. And it was Friday, late afternoon here, when I got this nice WhatsApp from both of these guys who said, "Jason, I think that sales and marketing are finally aligned." And so I think the real secret is put some pressure, spend the time, mutual respect, and ultimately, hopefully, you can spend some time where you actually like each other as well. So hopefully this has been helpful. Thank you very much. I appreciate your attention. Seems like we have some time for questions, if anyone has any burning questions. Yep. Do I just throw this thing? It's a team sport.
You mentioned the problem of analytics and sales and marketing analytics. We have that problem, and we get analytics out of Salesforce and we get analytics out of Marketo. Do you have any recommendations for platforms that can produce integrated analytics?
Yeah, I have 3. So these are just my opinions, mind you, right? But I think the first one is I'm still not opposed to Excel, frankly, until you can get yourself to the point where it's repeatable, right? I think it's a great place to help iterate on, these are the formats, these are the definitions, this is the sort of data. And so, I very much think that that's the starting ground and the proving ground for it. And then ultimately, I think the 3 winners in the space are Looker, Domo, and Tableau. I think you pick one of those 3. Hopefully something that's going to work for other parts of your organization, so it's not a topic or a decision just for the sales and marketing organization. And I think that you also, and then as part of making that decision, I think you make a decision on what's most likely to be adopted so that people actually look at it, see it, use it, and benefit from it. So is that, that was a question? Yeah. Looker owes me for throwing them in there. So, other questions? Going twice? Okay, with that, thank you very much. I appreciate it.